All right, ladies, let's go ahead and come on back from our break. You can find your seat. I did just want to say really quick, it's really fun to see all these babies everywhere, and that's why we're here, right? So don't feel like you have to leave if your baby's loud. We'll just talk louder. We're used to it. That's how we have conversations all the time. Well, we've had a chance to introduce ourselves a little bit, and hopefully you've had a good time getting to at least know everyone just a little bit around your table. So since we've all been introduced, we want to go ahead and just talk more about our theme, about what's going on in our lives, and just talk about seeking joy in the Lord and what that has looked like in our lives. The Lord has definitely directed us each in different ways towards joy. And so we're just going to share a bit about that and be transparent about what's going on. It seems like the Lord works in the more difficult moments of our lives, unfortunately. So we will be just being honest about, those difficult seasons and what the Lord has done in them. So we're going to get right to it. Just jump in a little further. Brittany, I'm going to pick on you first. Let's just go right for it. Was there a time in your marriage that you struggled but still found joy in the Lord?
Is it on? Okay. For many years, Paul and I were smooth sailing. We got married, we bought our first home, we were attending church and active in a small group for young married couples, and things were good. I worked in the medical field, and Paul had a corporate sales job, and we had our first baby, Jetson, and that was when we decided that I was going to stay home. So I started teaching other moms about natural wellness and how to have clean living in their home. And Paul, and together, we also started flipping homes. So life got a little busier, and we started noticing ourselves becoming a little bit more disconnected from our community. Our small group started to fizzle away because our friends were moving away, and we found ourselves missing out on church more often than not. We then had our second baby, Jones, and we continued living our day-to-day life until we were hit with an unexpected. Paul was let go from his successful sales career, and we were devastated. We were paralyzed. He had been a loyal employee for many, many years, and we did not see this coming. And it turned our lives upside down. So over the past 3 years, we've been through a lot of emotional lows. There's been it's been a roller coaster, to say the least. After this happened, shortly after, COVID hit. And to be honest, though, COVID didn't really even faze us because we were so wrapped up in our own struggles within the walls of our home that it was overshadowed by far. So we started picking up the pieces. Paul went right back to work the next day, except for this time he was hammering nails on a job site. So remember that flipping houses I told you about? We'll fast forward a few years, and now it's a big construction company building custom homes. So a lot has gone in the last few years. I also continued to pursue my doTERRA business intentionally. And what's crazy is that we had these successful businesses on the side that the Lord knew that one day they would come into play. So during this time of picking up the pieces, life got really hard. Our marriage started suffering, our parenting skills became less affected, and even our personal mental health was being affected. There was grieving of change, there was resentment, lack of trust, and confidence and self-worth. And in the midst of all of this, we found out I was pregnant. So that was a really hard day. And I briefly felt some joy, but it's quickly turned to a dark place. Where I'm usually the glass half full, everything brushes off my shoulders, I see the positive in everything type of person, I felt these characteristics slipping through my fingers. I didn't know why, on top of everything that we had been faced with, that we were going to yet experience another big life change. I could foresee it putting so much more strain on our marriage, and it definitely wasn't in our timing or in our plans, but and from my earthly view, it was the worst possible timing. I cried out to God days upon days upon days, asking him why now? Even telling him that if he had decided that he didn't want to expand our family anymore, that I would be okay with it. And not that I would have done anything to make that decision, but that if he did, thought I would be okay. But clearly I wasn't, because then the guilt started to rush in, and it was fast and heavy. I became sick over it and so scared. I wanted nothing but to see a healthy baby in my tummy. And I couldn't imagine anything happening. So on that first appointment, when I had an ultrasound and I got to see 2 moving arms and 2 moving legs and a healthy heartbeat, I sobbed with relief. And I promised God that I would do everything in my power to protect this baby. So even through the pain and the unknown and the fears, God, I felt him wrapping me up in his love. He has our best interest in mind, and he knows what he's doing. Even when it feels like I don't know what's going on and I don't know why, I have faith that he does. So then we found out we were having a baby girl, and after 2 boys, I could hear God whispering to me. Over and over again, I hear him saying, I see you. I know the struggles you've endured, and you've been faithful through it all. I know how much you love a little girl. So here you go, my child. I love you. And I held on to that. So God knew that Juniper was exactly what our family needed. We have experienced so much joy in the last year, and I couldn't imagine our family without our sweet Juniper.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Brittany, and just for being so real and transparent about what that has looked like in your life and how you've cultivated joy in your marriage through just really, really hard circumstances. And I think we just really want to be open and transparent and saying like, hey, we have microphones and we go through the same things you guys do. There's no difference. And it's just really cool to see what the Lord has brought you guys through. Just working, cultivating joy in your marriage. It can be hard to cultivate joy in difficult circumstances. And Maddie, I'm wondering, what does that look like for you? And specifically, how have you learned to cultivate joy in your motherhood?
Yeah, before becoming a mom, I remember dreaming about the joy that would come from having a tiny human who relied on me, wanted me, and was all mine. There really wasn't anything more fulfilling that I could imagine. I spent all my time working with kids, nannying, and I was over the moon when I was offered a job caring for babies all day. I was constantly told how patient I was and took pride in how well I cared and loved for other parents' kiddos. Fast forward to the day I found out I was pregnant. I took one pregnancy test, didn't think it was accurate, so I took 4 more. They were all dark blue positive, and I still brought them to my sister-in-law and was like, do you think this means I'm pregnant? So she's like, yes. So I found out I was already 8 weeks along, and I started to panic. My husband and I had a 5-year plan for a family that came 4 years too soon. And at the time, we were going through a really rough patch. We were on year 1 of marriage at 19, and it wasn't going that well. Just to be honest, divorce was on the table. So we were going through a hard time. And on top of that, we had just left our home church. Our pastor was kind of our mentor, and In a day's notice, the church decided that he was unfit to be a pastor, fired him, so we left in anger. That same spring, both of my grandmas passed away, so I was grieving that. And I had a falling out with my lifelong best friend. So I felt like my world was just falling apart. I was consumed with anxiety, and I was having frequent panic attacks. Hormones kicked in, and I was someone I didn't recognize. I was consumed with 24/7 nausea. My ankles swelled into balloons. I demanded my husband go find me a banana cream pie, 9 o'clock at night, all for myself. And I cried when the sea lions ate the penguins on Animal Planet. Yeah. And in all this, I had a really pivotal moment with the Lord on a more serious note. And I shared about this last year, but I was pregnant, crying on the bathroom floor. I feel like you always hear like dramatic moments on the bathroom floor. I don't know why I was there, but I was. And I just felt alone and scared, and I almost audibly heard the Lord ask me, am I enough? Is he enough? And it made me really stop and realize that I was living as if he wasn't enough. If my circumstances weren't going my way, I wasn't okay. And a term that I learned at high school Bible camp came to mind, and it was El Roi. And it's a reference to God that means the God who sees me. And I remember that came from the story of Hagar in the Bible, and she was pregnant and alone in the wilderness, and she refers to God as El Roi. She was fully seen, known, and loved by God, and that is how I felt in that moment. The Lord's presence provided security that my changing circumstances could not provide. So 7 months later, we welcomed our baby girl, Nora May, on Thanksgiving Day, 2015. She was a perfect little squish that made my heart grow in a way I didn't know it could. And although my love for her was instant, my transition into motherhood was not smooth. I thought my days of nannying had set me up to be this cool, calm, and collected mom, and they didn't. I remember just this heavy weight of feeling like I was way in over my head with this motherhood thing. I had no idea it would be like this. Sleepless nights followed days, busy days of trying to keep the house clean, cook meals, and work a job that stretched me to my max. I didn't know how to ask for help, and I didn't want to be the person that needed to. I remember typing in some mom forum, an SOS, how do you keep a house clean with a tiny baby who doesn't sleep? And a mom friend wrote back something like, give yourself grace, it's just a season. Snuggle that baby, the dishes can wait. And I just rolled my eyes and thought, no, I need help with this. My sleep deprivation mixed with anxiety left me a frazzled mess. I felt like I started to slowly lose myself in motherhood. I would look ahead to the next season and think, maybe I'll get some relief or maybe it'll get easier. And I had a lot of shame for not feeling more joy in that season. I often looked to other moms and not the Word of God. I really thought the Bible didn't apply to what I was going through. So sometime later, we decided on having one more baby, and I was just really nervous that my stress level would heighten. So we found out we were pregnant, and Nora, who was 3 at the time, was so excited for her baby sister. When we had the ultrasound, she was devastated that it was a baby brother. She cried and cried, but anyway, we had our sweet baby boy, Owen, and thank the Lord that boy knew how to sleep. However, even when I got a full night's sleep, I still found myself running on fumes, angry at myself for not being able to handle the normal day-to-day things better. And if I'm being honest, my desire to stay in control led me to anger. When my child wouldn't cooperate, or someone would change plans on me, or my house was a mess, I felt a bubbling anger to just get back in control of everything as fast as I could. I remember one normal day, my daughter walked up to me and said, "Mom, are you mad at me?" And I thought, why would I be mad at her? I'm not yelling at her. She's not even in trouble for anything. And I just realized that my attitude was really bad, and she was picking up on it. It was a really humbling moment that left me repenting before the Lord. I was convicted of my attitude and my actions, but I also was just met with the Lord's grace and knowing that He was there. The Lord's yoke is easy and His burden is light. We were never meant to carry the weight of the world. Motherhood pushed me to the end of myself. I tried grasping at straws for years, trying to stay on top of it all and be the mom who had it all together. I failed miserably and was left feeling worthless and ashamed of every failure I just couldn't get right. I was measuring myself up to other moms who appeared to do it all with grace and a smile. My standards for myself could never be met. The joy that I thought I had left only appeared when my to-do lists were checked off and my house was clean and I was caught up in life. Recently, I was sharing with a close friend that I just don't laugh as much as I used to. I shared that joy doesn't come as naturally as it did before kids. As a mom, I'm required to be on all the time. I have become the bearer of all appointments, allergies, discipline strategies. I'm supposed to be emotionally and physically available for any knee scrapes, meltdowns, sleepless nights. Not to mention, I want to be a good wife, friend, employee, take care of myself. I started to feel sorry for myself and my workload. I started to miss the easy days. But as I started to bring this to the Lord, I realized that what I thought was joy that I experienced before kids was rooted in sin and selfishness. It wasn't joy at all. It was doing what I wanted when I wanted and giving God whatever was left over. This is all a process, and I don't have it figured out by any means. We are all in process. And we want this year to be marked as a time of learning and growing together in this, cultivating joy together in the hardest of times and in our parenting victories. We want to do it all together. So that's a little bit more about that. Becca, can you tell us a little bit about how you have been learning to cultivate joy?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Maddie. So I feel like the Lord has really taught me about cultivating joy, really specifically through my pregnancy and postpartum experiences. My first two kids, I wasn't really living life very intentionally. I wasn't cultivating much of anything. I love the Lord, but I wasn't living very disciplined at the time that I had those two. And then the Lord taught me a lot before I had my third baby. So when Finley, my firstborn, was born 7 years ago, I had a pretty unexpected and traumatic C-section, and I just really didn't see that coming, and it was really traumatic. I'll say the word traumatic a few times, and I just don't really have the words to describe what that felt like. It was really scary, and then all of a sudden, I had this baby, and he was beautiful, and he slept all the time, and he was just wonderful. I thought all babies were like him because I was the first of my friends to have a baby, and so I just thought that's what babies were like. They sleep, they're wonderful, they're awesome. And I had this really traumatic experience that I just didn't really know what to do with, but all of a sudden life had just moved on, and I'm a mom now. And so I just kind of tucked that away and I guess compartmentalized it, didn't really think about it. And we just loved having Finley. And I just kind of pushed through the anxiety, and there was still a lot of joy in that season. And we loved being parents so much that when Finley was about 10 months old, we were like, let's do this again. Babies are awesome. And so I was pregnant again about the time Finley was 10 months old. And that really started like the most difficult season of our marriage, and definitely one of the most difficult seasons of my life. So my husband and I left the church that we were a part of in Portland shortly after I was pregnant with Ben. And we didn't have a church community anymore. We knew that we would be looking to move out in this direction toward Damascus eventually because my parents are out here and we wanted help. And so we started looking at churches around here. And about the time, I guess a little bit before Ben was born, we had been to Good Shepherd a few times and we really liked it, but we really just had like one foot in the door. So we didn't really have a community of believers around us. And my husband, Jake, was just stretched really thin at work. It seemed like our communication was breaking down, and we just weren't happy, to be honest. And I felt like we didn't have the tools to fix whatever was going on. It just kind of kept getting worse. And as advertised, I wasn't cultivating or being intentional about much of anything. And so we were just kind of at a loss in our marriage and still enjoying Finley. And then it came time for Ben to be born. and I had a plan to stay out of the hospital altogether because the hospital had been a really scary place for me. And so I was going to do a birth center birth, and it was going to be awesome. And that was plan A, and there was no plan B because I believed in plan A. And plan A did not work out. I found myself having similar difficulties in the labor as the first time. And so eventually, after a really long day laboring, I was transferred to the hospital for a C-section. And I just, I can't put into words how traumatic it was to walk back into a hospital. I really honestly didn't see that coming. I thought I would be able to at least walk back in there. It seemed like everything was happening in slow motion, and just the noises were just so loud in my ears. And of course, there's tools and everything in the operating room. And it was really traumatic for myself and also for my husband. And so all of a sudden we had another baby, and it just seemed like we weren't in a good place, and we were both pretty traumatized with that experience, and we didn't really have, a lot of community. We had our families, but the next few weeks were really rough. Ben didn't sleep for 13 months, and my sister's nodding her head I can verify. He didn't sleep, and I just didn't sleep for over a year. It was so difficult. And it just, when Ben was 3 weeks old, it seemed like the hitch just kept coming. I was driving downtown, and a car had just run through a stop sign and hit me right in Ben's car door. And so that was really traumatic. He ended up being fine, but to have your newborn baby, their door hit, it was just trauma piling on top of trauma. And his C-section hadn't gone that well. I had just a lot of blood loss, was as much as I knew at that point. And I ended up just getting really sick, and I was diagnosed a few weeks later with an autoimmune disease, acute onset of what ended up to be Hashimoto's thyroid disease. And so I was sick, I could barely get off the couch, and I just wasn't doing well. I would find out later that I had what's called exhaustive depression, and I didn't know that I had depression because I didn't feel sad. And that was way out of the norm for me. I'm typically pretty happy and really enjoy life. And so it was sneaky. I didn't realize that it was depression. But it kept spiraling as things just kept getting more difficult, and I wasn't cultivating joy or anything good, really. I love the Lord, but to be honest, I don't even think that I was aware of what I was dealing with. And I wasn't really even asking him for help at that time. So there came a time a few months later that I felt guilty that I couldn't get off the couch. All of this was just kind of accumulating. And I just felt like I should go for a drive. And I wanted to go for a drive alone, by myself, and just get out of the picture. And I think that that's shocking to people who know me just because it's not who I am. But at my weakest moment, I felt there was an enemy of our soul, and he was oppressing me. There was just a lot of lies that I was believing during that time. And so I just had this urge to go for a drive. And I thought that it was clear to everyone around me that they agreed with me. My kids deserved a mom who could get off the couch, and my kids deserved a better mom than me. And it's not that I had any particular plan. I just wanted to remove myself from the situation because I thought that was loving to them in this mindset that I was in. And I remember seeing a red flag go up in my head because I'm very visual. I saw a red flag being raised, and I remembered I've read about this. I've seen news articles of moms who didn't come home, and I had remembered a news article that I had read just a year or two before and the specifics of it. And I remembered, I didn't feel this way at the moment, but I remembered that I had felt so sad for her, just for all that she had missed out on. She couldn't see past the circumstances that she was in right now, and she missed out on the joys of motherhood. And so I made the decision to call my doctor, and I got help and resources that I needed right away. And there were still difficult circumstances in my life, and everything took some time, but I was able to start cultivating things, as I would say. I started to be more intentional. And I guess I just want to say, talking about postpartum depression. I know that some of you in the room have experienced that because we've talked about it. I've talked about it with some of you, and I'm going to just have some takeaways from my experience, and they won't be reflective of postpartum depression because it's so complex, right? Like, there was physical things going on in my body that I didn't have control over, like blood loss after the C-section. I found out like it flipped some of my like blood components that should have been high were low, and vice versa. So there was something physical going on there. But I wondered, for me, like, how could I have gotten to a place where this was possible for me? And I go back to, we didn't really have, we weren't living in community. We weren't involved with the church at that time. I was really just keeping things to myself. We were needing help in our marriage, pretty clearly. And so shortly after that time, I'm going to talk about my next experience, but I do want to fill the gap there. My husband and I, we got more involved at Good Shepherd, and we started doing the marriage mentorship program. And things just really started to turn around for us when we did that. We started to be more intentional about our marriage, intentional about our relationships with the Lord, and things got better. I felt like I was praying like impossible prayers to God. I felt like before I would stay married because it was the right thing to do, because we were Christians, and I didn't know if there'd be any joy in it. And so I just prayed these really big prayers for my marriage, and God answered those in just such an incredible way. We're living such a different life than we were just 5-6 years ago. And so the first step to that for us was we got marriage mentors, and they really helped us to just be intentional about our marriage. And so during that time, we're getting more involved at Good Shepherd. I'm at Mom to Mom now, and I have community. I have you guys. And I had mentor moms for a couple years, at Mom to Mom, and people that I could just go to for advice. I could talk to about hard things. I started to meet women at Women's Bible Study. And so I was just living more in community. And eventually, my physical health also improved. And so about 6 months after I was diagnosed with that autoimmune issues, my health started to turn around. And then within 3 or 4 years, I was able to get pregnant again. And we were really excited to have another baby. We love babies. And I knew that things had to be different this time. I could not walk down that road again. It just wasn't an option. And so I got help right away. I actually walked through the pregnancy with, I can't remember what they're called, but somebody like from my midwife's office, a social worker walked through it with me, and she would kind of just connect me with therapists and stuff. And so that was a great experience. I wouldn't have chosen that in the past, but that was the right fit for me. I had people, I knew that I had people I could talk to from Mom to Mom, from church. And we were just living in a different place. Like, we were in a good place in our marriage. We had community around us. I really felt like I had the support that I needed to be successful because we weren't living in isolation anymore. And so, dare I say, I thought that I had it all figured out. And I was about 12 weeks pregnant with baby Jude when the world shut down in March 2020. And I was isolated again. And I was terrified because this time I had no control over it, and I felt like there was nothing I could do to change that had happened, and I was really just fearful for what that would mean for my mental health, for how things would go in my pregnancy and with 3 little kids. And I really just relied on the Lord during that time like I never have before. The Lord just showed up for me in such a big way, and a lot of really tragic things happened in our family. We had some big losses that year, and you guys, we're talking about joy. I've got to bring this around, so I'm not going to go into what those were. But we had some really, really difficult things during that season. But I was walking with the Lord. I was, cultivating what I could, cultivating joy in the Lord. And I remember, like, at the deepest time of feeling the loss of loved ones, I was just dealing with grief. I would wake up and just know that I was going to just deal with grief today. So it was kind of hard to get out of bed. And there came a time when I was crying out to the Lord, and I was just saying, Lord, is there any joy left in this life for me? Am I going to enjoy this? Like, I have these beautiful kids and I feel like I can't enjoy like what's going on here. Am I going to laugh again? And I realized, and I think that the Lord brought to my mind in my most lonely, difficult time, that the joy that I did have was actually hope, or my joy was in the hope that I have, that Jesus is going to make all of this new someday, right? This isn't the end of the story. And so when I felt like I didn't have anything else, I had hope that I will see Jesus, I will meet him face to face someday, and I know that that's the reality. I am going to dwell with God forever in the fullness of his glory. And at that time, that felt like it was all that I had. So when we talk about joy here, we do mean like joy in the lighter things, that are mothering throughout the days, joy through diaper changes, those kinds of things. But we can also talk about the difficult things, joy in your darkest moments. And the Lord gave me Psalm 30. I'm going to read just a selection of verses from Psalm 30. Sing to the Lord, all you godly ones. Praise his holy name. For his anger lasts only a moment, but his favor lasts a lifetime. Weeping may last through the night, but joy comes in the morning. Hear me, Lord, and have mercy on me. Help me, O Lord. You have turned my mourning into joyful dancing. You have taken away my clothes of mourning, and you've clothed me with joy. And I love that idea of being clothed with joy, because I feel like even though I didn't have any control over the circumstances that I was walking through, the Lord just gave me joy that was just bigger than my circumstances. So to kind of wrap up that story, baby Jude was born during the wildfires. Just put the cherry on top of that sad story. And our circumstances were difficult, and they kept getting difficult. But for the first time, I didn't have any sort of postpartum anxiety or depression. And that was just such a gift from the Lord. I was able to enjoy this phase of motherhood with a young, with an infant, like I just hadn't been able to before. And that was such a gift for me. I want to make sure that I do say that's my experience, and I felt like controlling, or I shouldn't say controlling because I don't have control, I know it. The Lord, helped me cultivate and be intentional about the things that I did have control over to some degree, but, there are circumstances that you don't have control over. And so I don't want to say, like, if you trust in the Lord, you won't have postpartum depression, because we know that that's not the case. But I was just really thankful for how the Lord worked during that season, and how I was able to cultivate joy during that. That was about the longest way I could think of to answer your question of how the Lord has led me to cultivate joy.
Thank you, Becca. I've known you for 1.5 years, and so I'm gonna cry. I cry when we practice. thought that would help. Yeah, when I met Becca, she was exuding joy. And I was like, why is she so happy all the time? Like, how is she not stressed out ever? She was just like always happy. And she would say like, I just like having a good time. And she did. She like brought her kids along and just were like, we're going to have fun today. And so it's like really cool just to hear like how the Lord had walked you to this season. And this isn't just like fake joy. This is like rooted in hard things that you've walked through, and you've been faithful to the Lord. And it's just so cool to see how the Lord has worked in your life. So thank you for sharing. I know it's hard. Brittany, can you share with us a little bit about how you have been intentionally cultivating joy in your marriage?
Yeah, so to continue where we left off, it was time for us to make a really big decision in our marriage, and it would have changed the way that we continue to live life. So we decided to take a huge leap of faith and rely on God like we had never done before. We relied on him emotionally and spiritually, which were easy for us, but we also had to rely on him financially, which we had never done before and was really, really scary. There was no more 9 to 5, no more guaranteed paychecks. We decided to go full on entrepreneurship. So Paul put to work his real estate license that he had many years before, and I'm not quite sure what we were thinking, but we added on yet another business, and this time in the vacation industry world. We found ourselves raising baby businesses and young children, which led to little time with our family and even less time as a couple. And as if we thought our marriage was struggling already, it took an even bigger hit. And that's when we said, enough is enough, or so the Lord told us. A change needs to happen. We'd always loved being in community and being around married couples and hanging out and just sharing life struggles. And so at Mom to Mom last year, we were presented with an opportunity to join a marriage group called Love Like You Mean It from Tom and Racky Suter. And so I went home and I was so excited because we had found maybe a small group with young married couples, or not young married, but married couples that maybe we could hang out with once a week. So I went home and told Paul, and he was 100% on board. And that study is called Love Like You Mean It, and they'll be here in November to talk about that. So when that was finished up with the series, we didn't want to stop being intentional with our marriage. So we signed up for the marriage mentorship, like Becca had talked about, and it's been just what our marriage had needed. It had overflowed into our parenting and just into our family. And so we still aren't smooth sailing by any means, but I'm pretty sure that's not where God ever really wanted us in the first place.
Thanks for sharing about that, Brittany. It's great just to hear that you guys found tools that worked for you. That was our experience also. Like, it's so important to be intentional about cultivating joy in your marriage. And it's important to be intentional, I think, in other areas as well. Maddie, I'm wondering, what ways have you just been intentional about seeking joy? I'm gonna get it. About seeking joy in the Lord in your motherhood.
Yeah, I am going to get into this. I realized I totally left out like our marriage too. We also did marriage mentorship, I wanted to say, and that was a game changer for us. And it was totally the Lord that walked us out of this, like, we don't want to be together anymore, to like where we're at now. It's been God, and it's been hard, and it's been a lot of work. So I felt like I didn't want to leave you guys hanging there. Okay, so as far as motherhood goes, one of our theme verses puts it so simply: in your presence, there is fullness of joy. I realized that I wasn't in the Lord's presence enough. I wasn't face to face with the living God enough to experience that fullness of joy. I was having short interactions throughout the day, sure, but I wasn't meditating on His word and allowing it to transform the way I was living. So I started to dive into my Bible and started attending Bible study regularly. I remember picking up a devotional and reading a prayer that said, "Lord, help me to learn to love the things that need to be done." This spoke to me, so I scribbled it on a piece of paper and stuck it on my fridge, and it's still there. My passion isn't dishes and laundry, but they need to be done. So rather than seeking out new ways to find joy, why not pray for the Lord to change me and not my workload? Joy doesn't come from doing what I want all the time, I learned. It comes from a life of surrender to the Lord, a life of choosing Jesus, repentance, turning away from sin, and toward the Lord's safe embrace. Another phrase that stuck with me is, I do what I do because I love what I love. My life was a reflection of this. I had loved myself. I felt sad when things didn't go my way, or got angry when my children didn't act the way I wanted them to. I had to start choosing Jesus and His way more than anything else. And as we've talked about, the word cultivate requires action, discipline, faithfulness. For me, this looks like coming to the Lord sooner when I have failed. This looks like being late for school and needing to sit with my kids and apologize for reacting so harshly. This looks like me texting my mentor to pray for me when I want to isolate and handle it on my own. This looks like allowing others to truly know me, which is hard, flaws and all. But most of all, this looks like choosing Christ first, choosing to be in the Word of God, praying, lots of prayer with and for my husband, prayer over my kids, prayer that the Lord would save me from myself often. This mom life is messy and chaotic, and no matter how prepared we think we are before kids, we're still thrown into this whole new world called motherhood. And I'm just so excited that the Lord has brought each and every one of you here so that we can link arms and grow in this together.
I just love that, Maddie. When she was telling me this for the first time, I was literally like taking notes. I'm like, okay, reach out to my mentor, Mom. Stop in the parking lot. Or it's okay if we're late for work or for school, not work. So yeah, it's just amazing to hear and encouraging to hear just like the real life stories of moms and our struggles. So thank you for sharing. Becca, do you want to share in this phase of life how you are cultivating joy?
I don't want to follow that up, but yeah, sure. So the Lord has really just continued to work in my life since that hard time through my pregnancy with Jude and just a lot of the grief that we walked through. I'm still definitely majorly in process through that. And I feel like the Lord has been just really gracious in giving me like tools that I can use. And specifically spiritual disciplines, which are like action steps you can take, disciplines to having a better spiritual walk with the Lord, just getting to know God for who he is and get to know him better. And a few of those that have stood out to me and that I'm really thankful that the Lord has just like introduced me to recently. The first one is simplicity. And so that's been a really practical tool for me. I think about simplicity of schedule. I take a look at like what our family is involved in and just, pray about it. Like, Lord, is this what you have for us? Am I just like adding stuff to be like everyone else and like to be busy? And I'm finding that there's a lot of joy in just like taking out what can be taken out, not being too busy. And then on the other side of simplicity, just simple living. And this one has been a game changer for me. I feel like the Lord is kind of leading me away from a consumerism mindset, which is really difficult because that's all around us. Like you turn on the TV and they're like, you want this. And I usually do want it. So just trying to like live simple and being like, Lord, what do I need? Like, you're probably not calling me to that new jacket, those sorts of things. And I'm just finding that I'm not getting joy. I'm not relying on those false hits of joy from the Amazon delivery service. And, the next time that we get to eat something fancy or go to the coffee shop, which is difficult for me, it's hard. And the Lord is really working in my life towards simplicity, like stripping it back. What do I need? And that's just been growing me a lot. The other one is solitude, just being alone with God, which feels like the right answer, doesn't it? Yes, but the more that I actually am able to do that, I'm finding so much joy in just getting to spend time alone with the Lord. And it's usually when I'm able to do it like early in the morning and it's before the kids are up. And I just sometimes will just sit and just try to intentionally sit and listen. Sometimes I just read the Bible, but I'm finding that in his presence, there really is fullness of joy. And so I've just been enjoying just finding time alone with the Lord. And I realize that I'm talking to a group of moms with babies. And I'll be honest that I don't do that as often as I'd like to. But I'm really finding joy when I'm able to be alone with the Lord. And like the other night, Jude was up 3 times. And I did not practice that spiritual discipline that day. So the third one is practicing gratitude. And I've been surprised. For me, it's just, bringing to mind what I'm thankful for. But there's been a piece to it that I'm thankful for what the Lord has for me. And that has really led me away from comparing myself to other people, because God has given all of you, some really great things. And it's easy to compare and be like, oh, I'm a homeschool mom. She's a homeschool mom. I should look like her. So I feel like the Lord's just calling me to like keep my eyes on him, like stay in your own lane. I don't need to be like everybody else or have what they have, because no matter what I do, what I put my mind to, there's going to be women, there's going to be moms who do what I do, and they do it a little bit better, and they do it in cooler shoes. And that's just the way I'm finding that the world works. So it's been just really freeing to just refuse the comparison and say, Lord, like, when I ask the Lord, what do you want from me? I find answers in the Bible. Like I think of Micah 6:8, to seek, to walk humbly, to love mercy, to seek justice. Like those are the things that the Lord wants from us. They mean a lot more than the things that I'm often concerned about. And just, to live a quiet life and to focus on what the Lord has for me. So there's been a lot of freedom in that, and I'm finding there's also a lot of joy in that as well.
Cool, Becca. Thank you. I can actually say that I have seen these disciplines in Becca's life because sometimes I wake up in the morning and I have a text message from her from like 6:30, and I'm like, "What are you doing awake this early?" I'm still in bed nursing my baby, like trying to keep her asleep. No. I mean, my phone's on airplane mode, so I actually don't get it, but I can see that it came through early. And then the other day, I was walking up to her car. She was helping me with something, and I was like, "Becca, how is your car so clean?" There was like nothing in there. And of course, I'm just like vouching that this is like disciplines that she is really practicing, and I found it very valuable and encouraging. So, yeah. We are actually going to transition now into a time of table discussion. And so I just wanted to cover a few ground rules to help keep our time productive. And so, of course, we all have different views and different opinions, which is perfectly okay. But we want this to be a safe place. So let's just remember to be kind, be loving, and supportive, and let's build one another up. So we have 2 verses that we use to guide our time together. And the first one is Ephesians 4:29. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. And the other is from Proverbs 16:24. Kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul and healthy for the body. So let's just have this be a reminder for us during our time to try to stay positive and steer clear of any kind of gossip. I know that sounds weird, but it happens on accident. So let's just keep each other accountable for that. And using loving words when we speak about our husbands and our children and those that we love. And let's just also keep this time at our tables confidential, because it can be really hard and scary to share really hard and scary things. And we just want all of you to know that like you are safe here. So we are going to put some questions up on the screen, but don't feel like you need to rush through all these questions. Like camp out on whatever you need to. This is just a guide. But we are going to turn this time over to you guys and mentor moms. If you would like to open your table up in prayer before you guys start discussing the questions, that would be wonderful. So go ahead and start that.